If I hadn't done that, he would have killed you. And I want you to live an accomplished and happy life. Grow old and die a happy death. Ness smiled at me. And don't be shocked that I can touch you. This only means that I don't have much time left. I just want to tell you that I love you. I interrupted her and hugged her tightly as tears streamed down my eyes. I love you too, she seemed to say, but it was only a whisper because the next moment, Nene was no longer in my arms. She had disappeared forever. My name is Udoka, and this is the story of how I fell in love with a ghost. It may sound unbelievable to you, but it really happened, and I am here to share my story. A few years ago, when I still lived in the village, I used to join my mates to go to the village stream to fetch water from my grandparents, whom I lived with then. It was fun when you went with your friends, but very boring when you went alone. And on this particular day, I went alone. My grandmother had just returned from the market and had ordered me to fill up all the drums in the yard because she wanted to cook. I felt reluctant to do it because I would go alone, but I couldn't argue with my grandmother. So I obeyed her and left for the stream with my water gallons in my hands. On getting to the stream, I noticed that it was lonely. Of course, it was the middle of the afternoon, so no one was around. Everyone would either be in the market or doing one thing or the other at home. I was basically the only one there. Looking at the surface of the stream, I noticed that it gleamed attractively, almost as if it was inviting me to come in and swim. I instantly remembered the popular superstition in my village about the stream, where people often said that whoever came to swim in the stream alone during afternoons were more likely to get swept away by the water spirits who would attract them by making the surface of the water look attractive and inviting. Heh, I chuckled to myself. These are all lies. The reason I thought like this was because I had swum in that stream alone on a hot afternoon and nothing had happened to me. This particular afternoon, the water looked cool and comfortable, which was a wide contrast to the hot weather proudly sponsored by the sun shining brightly overhead. However, I was not in the mood to swim alone since it would just be boring, so I filled my water gallons and left. Just as I was leaving the stream, I heard the shout of a girl in the nearby bush. My senses suddenly became alert as I dropped my gallons to hear better. It was only when the cry came for the second time that I was certain that this was a cry for help. Without thinking, I jumped into the bush in search of the girl in distress. It didn't take me long to find a group of four men around a bound and blindfolded girl with what seemed like intentions of RAPE. The moment the men saw me, they turned and fled. Now, mind you, I was only 19 years at the moment, and I was neither a hunter nor a wrestler. So you would wonder why these men ran away when they saw me. Well, these men did not flee because I was a hefty looking man or because I was very strong. I think they ran away because this was a small village and they ran the risk of me seeing their faces and exposing them. Without wasting any time, I quickly untied the girl and loosened her blindfold. Now that I could see her face properly, I realized that I knew her. She was actually my classmate in school. I was about to ask her what happened and how she ended up in such a situation. But instead of answering me, the man who saved her, she slapped me across the face with a loud cry and ran away while crying and yelling. I made myself believe she hadn't gotten over the shock of almost being raped. So at that moment, everyone around her was a potential threat. I didn't really mind, so I gingerly touched my smarting cheek and returned to the pathway to pick up my gallons and take them home. On my way home, I began to have a nasty feeling like I was being followed. Initially, I thought it was the girl I saved who had come back to apologize, but whenever I turned back, I would see no one. It began to feel disturbing, and I had to walk home really quickly. As I walked home, I felt goosebumps all over my arms, neck, and legs. There was no cold wind, and the sun was still shining high in the sky, but there I was, having strange goosebumps. The moment I got home, I emptied the gallons and hurried inside, wondering whether my feeling of being stalked was a figment of my imagination or whether it was just a side effect of hunger, because I was very hungry. After fetching the water from my grandmother to cook, I found myself faced with a sumptuous meal of pounded yam and egusi soup, garnished with lots of meat and stockfish. The delicious meal was enough for me to forget that creepy experience, but little did I know that it would occur again. Remember that I told you that the girl who was almost raped earlier was my classmate? Well, she approached me in private during break time and apologized for slapping me while I was rescuing her. I told her that I understood, and she asked whether we could be friends, to which I said yes. Unluckily for me, my friends saw the girl talking to me, and when I went back to hang out with them, I couldn't hear the end of it. They overdid it that I had to leave them behind after school and go home alone. I was already halfway home when I started getting that nasty feeling of being stalked again. I turned around and just like before, there was no one following me. At this point, it became really puzzling and scary to me. Who was following me and why? I stood at that spot and stared into empty space for a long while. There was no one in sight, and I was the only one on the road as far as I could tell. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. With a shaky voice, I managed to ask, "Who's there? Show yourself." Nothing happened. I let out a small sigh of relief. It's not like I expected anyone to show up. I knew it, I told myself. It's just my imagination. Nothing much. I was about to turn around and continue my journey home when an abnormal gust of wind blew around me, and suddenly everywhere became cold. I felt goosebumps cover my arms, legs, and neck as I saw a young woman materialize out of nowhere in the middle of the road that had been previously empty. The woman was so beautiful that I had no doubt that she was not from this world. She was also dressed in a long, swaddling white gown that seemed like it was made out of smoke because it didn't have a definite shape. I was instantly enveloped in terror and fear, but my legs froze and I couldn't run away. My throat also dried up and I couldn't scream. I was completely petrified as I stood there in the middle of the road, shaking like a leaf. I couldn't even process the details of her face at that moment. All I knew was that my mind was going haywire with terror. All I wanted to do was to run away, but I couldn't. It didn't even occur to me that running away was futile. She was a ghost. If I ran away, she would still find a way to catch up to me. All of a sudden, she opened her mouth to speak, and it was then I noticed some details about her face. She was really beautiful, and in addition to that, she looked really sad, like she was feeling pity for me. However, I never got to hear what she had to say because someone came onto the road from the bend and she vanished immediately, leaving me standing alone again. Fortunately for me, the person who had come onto the road was my grandfather. He was returning from the market where he sold meat. It seemed he had finished making sales for the day. "Grandpa," I called out with a forced smile in order to hide the terror on my face. But the smile was so forced, it looked twisted, and my grandfather noticed immediately. "Udo, my son, are you back from school already?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I replied. "I hope there's no problem," he asked again with a tinge of amusement. "You look like you just saw a ghost." My heart skipped a beat when he mentioned ghost. Does he know? I asked myself as my eyes scrutinized his face carefully. But he had this small smile plastered on it that made me believe he was just joking. I considered telling him about the ghost I saw, but apart from the low chances of him believing me, there was also the option of the ghost coming to harm him. There was no guarantee that she was a good ghost, so I had to be brave and figure out what was happening first. No, I laughed awkwardly in response to his question. I'm fine. My grandfather paused and looked at me with his old wise eyes. I had to avert my gaze uncomfortably because I couldn't bear to lie to that face. From his demeanor, I could tell that he was curious as to why I was standing alone in the middle of the road with a pale and terrified expression on my face. But since I had already told him that there was nothing wrong, he shrugged it off and continued my journey home with me. While we walked home, I couldn't get my mind off the apparition that had appeared before me. Who is she, and what does she want with me? I couldn't answer those questions any more than anyone else could answer them. Deep inside, I felt really glad that I ran into my grandfather. I felt safe as I walked with him. At least I no longer felt the naked, uncomfortable feeling of being watched. I could only hope that the woman would not appear again, because regardless of her beauty, she was still scary. It was only later in the night, as I assisted my grandfather to pack some things, that I summoned up courage and asked him, "Grandpa, are ghosts real?" He chuckled and turned to me. "Why are you asking? Have you seen one?" "Not really," I replied. "I'm just curious." Mm, well, he paused his work for a while before continuing. "I haven't seen one in my lifetime, but I am certain they exist. Our world is more spiritual than it seems." I nodded in response. I was now certain that the woman I saw earlier was a ghost. But what does she want from me? Why does she keep following me around? I didn't know that I would find the answers to that question sooner than I thought. After helping Grandpa out with his work and having dinner that Grandma prepared, I went straight to bed because I was very tired. I concluded that any thoughts about the ghost would have to wait till the next day. Around midnight, I awoke to the sound of the cold night wind battering against my window. Did I not close this window before going to sleep last night? I thought as I stood up groggily from the bed and went to close it. As I arrived at the window, I noticed that the moon was still high up in the sky and it illuminated everywhere brightly, including the interior of my room. And it was because of the light from the moon that I caught sight of something moving in my room. I spun around quickly, only to come face to face with a spectral being sitting calmly on the chair in my room. My heart sank in my stomach and I wanted to scream, but she opened her mouth to speak and her voice calmed my soul. "Please do not shout. I am not here to harm you." I did not shout, but my heart was pounding rapidly against my chest. "Who are you?" I stuttered. "My name is Ne, and I am a ghost who has been unable to pass to the other side," she replied. "What do you want from me?" I asked with a shaky voice. "Nothing really." I couldn't believe my ears. "Nothing?" I thought. She wants nothing from me and she has been threatening to kill me with fright. Oh God, what did I do to deserve this? When she saw the distraught look on my face, she continued, "I actually find you a bit interesting for a human." "Interesting, K," I echoed to myself. Now wow, I don't enter trouble. "I was present on the day you rescued that young girl from RAPISTS. You were?" I retorted. "Yes," she replied calmly. "If you were, why didn't you rescue her then?" I asked obstinately. "I didn't rescue her because ghosts are forbidden from interfering in the affairs of humans unless under certain conditions." I couldn't bring myself to wrap my head around her words, so I muttered, "That's a bad excuse, you know." "I know." She pressed her lips together. "But that's the reality of our existence as ghosts." "Okay," I shrugged. "So are you here to thank me for saving a girl from RAPISTS?" "Not really." Ness shook her head. "I believe she has done that already." "Are you stalking me everywhere I go?" I frowned. "Yes, you're an interesting human. But don't worry, I don't look when you're in the bedroom." She laughed after saying this and I felt a strong wave of embarrassment. However, her laughter was soft, calm and soothing. I noticed that I was no longer scared of her. I was having a conversation with her like I was talking to a normal human being. "I'm going crazy," I chuckled to myself. "If Grandpa hears me talking, he'll think I'm talking to myself." "So I'm here to get to know you better," Ned continued. "You are a noble young man, and I believe that you'll grow into an amazing, respectable, and responsible man." But before then, I want to know you better. I thought ghosts are forbidden from interfering with humans. I furrowed my brows. Except under certain conditions, yes, she nodded. But I couldn't resist showing myself to you. You might say that I'm attracted to you. Well, I shrugged. I think you picked the wrong person. I'm just an average normal human guy. There's nothing special about me that could warrant your interest. Well, I'm already interested in you, she seemed to shrug. The best you can do is to tell me whether you'd like for us to be friends or not. I thought about it. It would be strange and interesting to be friends with a ghost. But what if she has bad intentions for me? I looked at her again and shook my head. No, she doesn't look like she has bad intentions for me, I thought. Plus, if she wanted to kill me, she would have done that since. After all, what can I do against the ghosts? Okay then, let's be friends. She smiled at me, and I realized once again that Nne was extremely beautiful. After that night, Nne followed me to a lot of places, and we spent a lot of time talking whenever I was alone. I became very fond of her, and she became like my best friend. I told her a lot of things, and she told me a lot of things too, including how she died and the events that led up to it. She was forced to marry a rich old man by her parents because they were poor and he offered them a lot of money. Her parents did not know that the man was a ritualist, and before they were aware of what was happening, they never heard from their Nne again. She said that her mother still cries about her till this day, but also said that she doesn't pity her mother because the woman is a greedy fool. However, despite telling me all this, Nne never told me why her spirit was still in the human world and has not transcended to the spirit world yet. But as long as there was no problem with her being in the human world, I was happy and she was happy. In school, the girl whom I rescued introduced herself to me as Oge and started getting close to me too. She was offering to help me and to be with me on a lot of things that everyone started thinking that she had a crush on me, including Nne. In fact, it was so bad that one day, as I was coming back from school alone, I noticed that Nne was talking to me with an attitude. I asked her what was wrong, and she replied me that I should go and ask my wife, Oge. I was so shocked when she said this that I stopped walking and looked at her with surprise written all over my face. What do you mean by that? Whenever you're in school, you never make out time to talk to me. You're always talking with Oge, and it's making me. She stopped talking. Jealous? I completed it for her, and she turned away sadly. I watched her for a while, not knowing what to say. It seemed that Nne felt that I would start spending more time with Oge and forget about her. But that was not possible. In the few days that I had spent with Nne, I had come to enjoy and crave her company. There was no way I was replacing her with Oge. I made my thoughts known to Nne, and she turned to me with a look of shock in her eyes. The shock only lasted for a moment, because the next minute, tears were streaming down her eyes. What's the matter? I asked out of concern. I would have tried to console her by holding her hand or her shoulder, but she was a ghost, so I couldn't touch her. Nothing. She looked up and smiled sadly. It's just that it's been a long time that anyone has made me feel wanted like this. I smiled at her and told her that it was okay. After that day, our friendship continued to blossom and wax stronger. As the days blended into weeks, I realized that my friendship with Nene was becoming stronger and deeper. Whenever I went to bed at night, I always looked forward to seeing her the next day. I started staying alone more often so I could speak with her for longer periods of time. A lot of people around me noticed this, but I told them that I just liked being alone. I couldn't tell them that my new best friend was a ghost. With time, I noticed that the dynamics of my relationship with Nene changed. Whenever she looked at me, I knew that she was looking at me as more than a best friend, and I was certain that I looked at her the same way. Before I could realize what was happening, I was neck deep in love with her. I began to think about how I would tell her about it without making things awkward. Whenever I made up my mind that I would tell her, my courage would fail me and I would postpone it to the next day. Things continued like that until one fateful day, I woke up in the morning and I did not hear Nne's voice. I called and called her name into the empty air, but there was no response. I almost got worried, but I managed to convince myself not to worry, that she must have gone somewhere and would be back before the end of the day. A whole day passed by and I did not hear from Nne. I became worried, but I could not do anything but wait for her to contact me again. Another day passed and I didn't hear from her. By this time, I had begun to miss her terribly, and it was affecting me. I was so sad, but I didn't make it too obvious, so my grandparents wouldn't notice. Meanwhile, it was eating me up inside. Days turned into weeks, and before I knew it, it was already 2 weeks since I last heard from Nne. I was terribly worried about her, and I missed her, but there was nothing I could do. I was just a mere human being. I couldn't find a ghost. One fateful day, as I was returning home from school with my friends, I heard Nne's voice in my ears. She was calling my name. I paused, and my face twisted in what seemed like a mixture of shock and happiness. I had to restrain myself from calling out her name so my friends wouldn't think that I was crazy. They saw that I stopped and they asked me, Udo, what's wrong? Why did you stop? Nothing, I replied. I just remembered that I forgot to do something. I'll be back. Without waiting for a reply from them, I turned back and ran in the direction of the school to deceive them. But once I noticed that they were out of sight, I diverted and ran in the direction of the stream because that was where Nne was calling me to. I ran there as fast as I could, and when I got there, I found her at the spot where I rescued Oge from RAPISTS. She was sitting calmly on an upturned stone, looking as beautiful as ever. I felt my heart swell with joy at the sight of her. Is this normal at all? I asked myself. Is it normal to feel this way because of a ghost? My thoughts about my feelings were instantly dispelled when I saw the tears dropping down Nne's face. Nne, what's the matter? Why are you crying? I asked out of concern as I rushed to her side. I missed you. She looked up at me and smiled sadly. I missed you too. I smiled back at her. I've been lonely. Where have you been? What's happened? That's what I'm here to tell you about, she said. I could hear the sadness in her voice. Something was wrong. I am no longer free to come and see you like before, she continued. Why is that? I asked as I felt my heart drop in disappointment. Well, there's a secret I've kept away from you ever since. She looked down sadly. I didn't want to tell you because I was scared that you would push me away if you knew. What's that? I asked desperately. Nne, what's going on? There was a brief moment of silence before Nne spoke. I am bonded to another ghost. By bonded, do you mean? Yes, marriage. I have a ghost husband. I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces, but I tried to hide the heartbreak and disappointment with a smile. Oh, I replied. I understood why she hid it from me. If she had told me from the onset, I may not have fallen for her the way I did. But it was too late now. I was already too deep in love with her. I'm sorry for not telling you about it earlier, Nne pleaded with remorseful eyes. It's just that I don't love him. It was a bond that was forced on me by the ritualist who killed me, so that he would continue to gain spiritual benefits from my spirit as long as I remained on earth. The man I love is you, Udo, and nothing is ever going to change that. But my spirit husband has found out that I have fallen in love with someone else, and he has started restricting my movements. This might be the last time you will see me, Udo, because I just managed to escape him just to come see you. I just wanted you to know how I feel about you. I was speechless as I heard Nne's words. This was the first time she was telling me that she loved me directly with words. I wanted to tell her that I loved her back, but my tongue froze in my mouth. I could only look at her with sad eyes. I couldn't believe that I wouldn't see her again. Nne, just as I had made up my mind to tell her how I felt, I was interrupted by a loud roar. "Ne, woman, where are you?" Ne's expression instantly became panicked and she said, "Udo, you have to get out of here. That's my husband, and he's going to kill you if he sees you." I wasn't afraid of Ne's husband. My heart was filled with regret that I wasn't able to tell Ne how I felt about her. I knew I was wrong to think like this, but I low-key wanted to die so I could be a ghost too and be with Ne. But apparently, Ne didn't want me to die because she was trying to protect me from her husband. Neither of us acted fast enough because her husband appeared in front of us before I could move. He was a gigantic armored beast who looked like a man with two horns, and he held a large wooden stick in his hands. I was instantly filled with fear because of the terrifying ghost that now stood before me. "Ne, you disobeyed me. Why did you leave the mansion again?" He boomed loudly, but paused when he saw Ne trying to shield me from him. "And who is that one that you are trying to hide?" he asked mockingly. "Is that the mortal that has been making you leave my mansion all the time?" "You have no business with him," Ne replied bravely, though I could hear traces of fear in her voice. Her husband must really be a scary person. "Allow him to go, and I'll come back to the mansion to stay with you forever." "No, now. There's no way I'll see the boy that's trying to steal my woman and I'll let him go free. At all." "My husband, do not do anything rash." The next statement sounded more like a warning than an advice. "Shut up, woman. No be you go tell me wetin I go do." With one wave of his hand, Nell was pushed to the side, and with another wave of his hand, I felt myself lift from the ground and float towards his outstretched hand. My body was stricken with terror, and I could swear that I knew that I would die at that moment. However, Nell was not going to allow the man she loved die like that. She screamed and pushed forth a ray of light from her hands. "Ah!" her husband yelled as the ray of light hit him, and I dropped to the floor. He angrily tried to pick me up again, but Ned did not give him a chance. She shot another ray of light that struck him and gave me the chance to hide myself. With hatred in her eyes, Ned fired ray upon ray of light on her husband till his spirit form became very weak and he disappeared. I was so relieved and I rushed out towards Nne. "Is he dead?" "Spirits cannot die." She turned and smiled at me. "His spirit only lost his connection to this world. He can never return again." I smiled broadly and was about to rejoice when I noticed something off about Nne. Her form was vanishing. "Nne," I asked in a panicked voice, "you are disappearing." "Oh." She smiled calmly as if she was just noticing it and looked at her palm that was vanishing. I must have used too much power. "What does that mean?" My voice was filled with panic. "It means that I am also crossing over to join my husband permanently on the other side." I was shocked. I was heartbroken. "No, you can't do that. You shouldn't have done that." Tears filled my eyes as I spoke. "I don't want you to leave me again." Ines smiled sadly, walked up to me and touched my cheek. I was shocked. I never knew she had the power to touch a human. "If I hadn't done that, he would have killed you. And I want you to live an accomplished and happy life, grow old, and die a happy death." Ines smiled at me. "And don't be shocked that I can touch you. This only means that I don't have much time left. I just want to tell you that I love you." I interrupted her and hugged her tightly as tears streamed down my eyes. "I love you too," she seemed to say, but it was only a whisper because the next moment Nell was no longer in my arms. She had disappeared forever. I fell on my knees and I cried my eyes out because I had fallen in love with a ghost who risked everything to save my life. Many years later, I still think about her, and I'll admit that sometimes I hear her last whisper echoing in my head, a reminder of the love I shared with that spectral being.